The boardroom didn't know what it had just done. The man on his knees on that polished concrete floor, the one with grease still worked into the creases of his knuckles, the one whose daughter had stopped crying only because she'd gone quiet with shock. That man held a piece of paper inside his jacket that could end every career in the room. He knew it. He waited. The morning had started the way most of Reed Calloway's mornings started, with his daughter's sneakers on the wrong feet and a bowl of cereal she hadn't touched. Hannah, shoes. She looked down, looked back up at him, and didn't say anything. She was 6. She communicated mostly in expressions, and the expression she was giving him now said, "I know. I just don't care yet." He switched them himself, crouched in front of her in the narrow kitchen of the house they'd been renting for 2 years. The house had a drafty window in the bedroom and a water heater that knocked every morning at 5, but it was theirs, or close enough. He paid rent on time. He kept the yard. He didn't bother anyone. "Eat something," he said. "I'm not hungry. 2 bites." She took one, held up a single finger, and looked at him like she was negotiating a treaty. "Deal," he said. That was how they worked. He dropped her at Millhaven Elementary on his way to the garage, watched her walk through the door without looking back. She never looked back, not since she was 4, fiercely self-sufficient in a way that made his chest ache. And then he drove the 12 blocks to Calloway Auto. It wasn't much. A 2-bay garage on the edge of downtown, wedged between a dry cleaner and a closed-up insurance office. He'd painted the sign himself. The lift in Bay 2 sometimes stuck at 6 feet and required a specific kick to the hydraulic panel, a technique he'd taught to his one employee, a 23-year-old named Gordy, who showed up every day on a bicycle and worked with a focused seriousness that Reed genuinely respected. He had not always been a man who ran a 2-bay garage in a small town in Ohio. He didn't think about that much, or he tried not to. By 9 that morning, he was underneath a 2019 Silverado, assessing a brake line that had been quietly failing for longer than the owner probably realized when Gordy knocked twice on the undercarriage. "Someone here for you?" "Tell them I'm booked through Thursday." She said, "It's not about a car." Reed rolled out on the creeper, sat up and wiped his hands on a shop rag. A woman was standing in the entrance of the bay. She was maybe 50, wearing a charcoal blazer, and she had the posture of someone who had spent a long time being very careful about what she showed on her face. "Mr. Calloway," she said. "That's me. My name is Helen Marsh. I'm an attorney with Fenwick & Associates in Columbus." She paused in a way that suggested she was measuring the distance between what she was about to say and how he would receive it. "I've been looking for you for 8 months." Reed said nothing. He stood up slowly, dropped the shop rag on the workbench, and looked at her. "Is this about Delvance?" he asked. She didn't flinch, but something shifted in her eyes. "Yes," she said. "It is." He took her into the small office he kept at the back of the garage, a room with a metal desk, a filing cabinet, a coffee maker, and a framed photo of Hannah, at 3 years old, sitting inside the engine bay of a 1967 Mustang, grinning like she owned the world. Helen Marsh sat in the chair across from his desk and placed a manila envelope on the surface between them. "Before I say anything else," she said, "I want you to understand that what I'm about to tell you was not something your father intended to be simple. He built in layers. He was thorough. He was controlling," Reed said. She looked at him steadily. "That too. But in this case, the result may be the same." She folded her hands. "You know about the trust. I know he set one up. I know he cut me out of the company when I left. I know he made it very clear that I was not welcome back." "That's partially correct," she said. "You were removed from operational control. You were not removed from the trust." She let that sit for a moment. The Calloway Group Trust, established 1991, amended 1999, and again in 2004. You hold a 31% beneficial interest. That interest was structured to remain dormant under a set of specific conditions. 3 weeks ago, those conditions were met. The coffee maker was dripping. Somewhere in Bay 1, Gordy was running an impact wrench. The sound was very ordinary and very far away. "What conditions?" Reed asked. "Your father required that you be absent from the company for no fewer than 7 consecutive years, that you demonstrate. And I'm using his exact language here, the capacity to build something of your own without his name, and that you make no legal claim against the trust during that period." She glanced briefly at the photo of Hannah, then back at him. "You satisfied the last condition the day you opened this garage. The 7 years elapsed 14 months ago. And the company," Reed said carefully, is in the process of being acquired, Helen Marsh said, by Harmon Meridian Capital. He knew the name. He knew it the way you know the name of something that has been circling at the edge of your vision for months without ever quite coming into focus. They've been working on this deal for how long? 18 months. The current CEO, Renata Solis, has been the primary driver. The board approved a letter of intent 6 weeks ago. Closing is scheduled for the end of the quarter. She paused. There's a problem, Mr. Calloway. A significant one. Harmon Meridian is not what they've represented themselves to be. Their principal funding structure involves a series of shell entities in Delaware and the Cayman Islands. We have reason to believe the acquisition is designed to strip the company's intellectual property portfolio and dissolve the operating divisions within 18 months of closing. He looked at her. How many employees does Delvance have now? Approximately 412. He was quiet for a moment. And Renata Solis knows this? Helen Marsh's expression did not change. We believe she has a personal financial arrangement with the acquiring party, a consulting agreement, backdated. She stands to receive approximately $3 million, regardless of what happens to the company after closing. She opened the manila envelope and placed a document on the desk. As a 31% beneficial interest holder, you have the legal right to contest this acquisition. You have the right to demand full financial disclosure, to trigger a shareholder review, and, under the terms your father wrote into the original trust documents, to call for an emergency board session within 14 days of formal notice. Reed looked at the document. He didn't pick it up. I walked away from that company, he said. I walked away because my father and I couldn't be in the same room without one of us walking out. I walked away because I didn't want to spend my life running something I'd been handed. I built this. He gestured broadly at the room around him. It's small. I know it's small. But it's mine. I understand that, she said. 400 people, he said. Yes. He picked up the document. He didn't tell Gordy much. He said he had some business in Columbus, that he'd be back by end of week, and that if the Silverado owner called, the brake line situation was serious, and she should not drive it until they'd finished. Gordy nodded, like this was all perfectly normal, because Gordy was 23 and had not yet developed the habit of asking the questions that occurred to him. Reed told Hannah he was going on a trip for work. What kind of work? She asked. Fixing something. She considered this. Like a car? Not exactly. Okay, she said, and went back to her book. She was reading chapter books now, thick ones, above her grade level, about dragons and kingdoms and children who discovered they were more important than anyone had realized. He'd noticed she never seemed surprised when the child in the story turned out to be powerful. She just nodded. Like this confirmed something she'd already suspected. He kissed her forehead and left her with his neighbor, a retired woman named Audra, who watched Hannah sometimes and made her grilled cheese in a cast iron pan the way Hannah liked, with the edges crispy. He drove to Columbus the next morning. The Delvance Engineering Building was not where he remembered it. They'd moved. A newer tower, glass and steel, in the development district near the river. The lobby was large and bright and staffed by 2 people behind a curved reception desk. He was wearing clean jeans, a button-down shirt, his jacket. He'd left the shop boots at home and put on the brown leather shoes he'd bought for his wife's sister's wedding 4 years ago and hadn't worn since. He carried the manila envelope Helen Marsh had left with him. He walked to the reception desk. I'm here to see the board, he said. I have a legal matter that requires immediate attention. The woman behind the desk, young, efficient, already reaching for her phone, looked at him once. Do you have an appointment? I don't. I'm sorry, sir, the board isn't available for. My name is Reed Calloway, he said. I'm a 31% interest holder in the Calloway Group Trust, which is the founding entity of this company. I'm invoking my right to formal notice under Section 12 of the original trust agreement. He placed the document on the desk in front of her. Please call whoever needs to be called. She looked at the document. She looked at him. She picked up the phone. He sat in the lobby for 22 minutes. He watched the people moving through, engineers with badge lanyards, someone with a rolling whiteboard, a delivery person with a cart. He'd spent 6 years in a building like this, in a city like this, at a company like this, had spent those years in meetings about tolerances and supply chains and design cycles and quarterly projections, had known every floor, every conference room, every face at the table. He'd given it up because he'd needed to. Because the morning after his wife's funeral, he'd sat in the parking garage of the Columbus office and understood, with a clarity that felt almost physical, that he could not grieve her and keep being who he'd been at the same time. Something had to change. Everything changed. He didn't regret it. He did not, sitting in this lobby with the document on his knee, regret a single day of the garage, or Gordy and his bicycle, or the drafty window, or Hannah's sneakers on the wrong feet. But 400 people. A door opened across the lobby. A woman walked toward him. She was in her mid-40s, dark suit, dark hair, and she walked with a specific kind of authority, the kind that came not from confidence exactly, but from years of being the person who decided things and having everyone in the room adjust accordingly. Renata Souslis. He'd seen her photo in an industry newsletter. She'd taken over Delvance 3 years ago, after his father had stepped back from active operations. She'd grown revenue. She'd won awards. She'd done interviews about the future of automotive engineering. She'd done all of this while apparently negotiating a personal windfall from the company's destruction. She stopped in front of him. "Mr. Calloway," she said, "I understand there's some confusion about your status with the trust." "No confusion," he said. He stood up. He was taller than her, which he suspected she'd already accounted for because she didn't step back. "I've consulted with counsel. The documents are in order. We have our own legal team," she said pleasantly, "and they've reviewed the trust structure extensively in preparation for the acquisition. I think you'll find that your understanding of your interest may be—" "I'd like to address the board," he said. "The board is in a scheduled session. I'm invoking a 14-day notice under Section 12, he said. "Your own legal team can confirm that triggers an obligation. I'm not asking for a favor, Miss Solis. I'm exercising a right." Something moved in her expression. Not quite fear, she was too practiced for that, but something that resembled a calculation being revised. "I'll see what I can do," she said. What she could do, it turned out, was call security. 2 guards approached him from the side, not aggressively, but with a professional deliberateness that made clear they'd been told he was a problem to be managed rather than a man to be heard. "Sir," one of them said, "I'm going to need to ask you to come with us." "I'm not trespassing," Reed said. "I have legal standing to be here. I've stated my business." "Sir." The lobby had gone quiet. The woman at the reception desk had her eyes on her computer screen in a way that meant she was watching everything. An engineer near the elevator had stopped pretending to look at his phone. "This is a mistake," Reed said, to Renata Solis, not to the guards. "Not for me, for you." She held his gaze for a moment. Then she looked away. They walked him out. He sat in his truck in the parking structure for 45 minutes. He called Helen Marsh. "They removed me from the building," he said. "I know," she said. "I've already filed for emergency injunctive relief. We have a hearing Friday morning. Can you be in Columbus?" "Yes." "Reed." She paused. "There's something else. Our forensic accountant finished his review last night. The shell entities, it's worse than we thought. There's a pattern of asset prepositioning that suggests they're planning to begin the IP transfer before the deal officially closes. If that happens before you get a hearing, how long do we have?" 72 hours. Maybe less. He sat with that for a moment. "Okay," he said. "This is going to get complicated," she said. "It's already complicated," he said. "That's not new." He called Audra and asked if Hannah could stay an extra 2 nights. Audra said, of course. He drove to the hotel Helen Marsh's office had booked, a mid-range place near the courthouse district, and sat on the edge of the bed and opened his laptop. He knew the Delvance IP portfolio. He knew it the way you know something you spent 6 years building. Not as an abstract collection of patents, but as specific problems that had taken specific people, specific months to solve. The variable compression engine platform they developed in 2013. The thermal management system. The drive-by-wire integration architecture that 3 larger manufacturers had licensed. He'd been in the room for all of it. He'd been at the whiteboards. He knew exactly what those patents were worth, and he knew exactly what it would mean if they were stripped out and sold piecemeal through a Cayman shell while 400 engineers showed up to work one morning and found the lights off. He worked through the night, cross-referencing what Helen's forensic accountant had found with what he remembered, building a picture that was, by 3 in the morning, very clear and very damning. He slept 4 hours. He was at Helen Marsh's office by 7:30. The hearing was Friday at 9. He did not know what he expected. He had not been in a courtroom since the proceedings after his wife's accident. Quiet, administrative things, insurance matters, the paperwork of grief. This was different. Helen Marsh was precise and unhurried. She laid out the trust structure, the acquisition timeline, the financial irregularities, and Reed standing to contest each element. Renata Solis was there with 3 attorneys from a firm Reed recognized as expensive. They argued technical grounds, standing, notice period, procedural requirements, in a way that was clearly designed to consume time rather than address substance. The judge, a woman in her 60s with the patience of someone who had seen this kind of thing before and was not impressed by it, listened to both sides and then asked Renata Solis's lead attorney a single question. Is the existence of the Calloway Trust disputed? No, Your Honor, but is the beneficiary structure of that trust disputed? A pause. The specifics of Mr. Calloway's interest are subject to. Is it disputed? Another pause. No, Your Honor. Then I'm granting the temporary injunction, she said. The acquisition is paused pending a full hearing. Miss Solis, I'd strongly recommend that your client make herself available to answer some questions about the consulting agreement with Harmon Meridian. That seems like something the board might also want to know about. She looked over her glasses with an expression that was not quite a warning and not quite a suggestion. We're adjourned. The board called an emergency session 3 days later. Reed wore the same brown leather shoes. He walked into the conference room on the 22nd floor, glass walls, river view, a long table with 8 people seated around it. And he understood, for the first time in a very long time, what it felt like to be in a room where he held the weight. He didn't enjoy it exactly. He'd spent enough time in rooms like this to know that power was rarely as satisfying as the approach to it. But he stood at the end of the table, and he placed his documents in front of him, and he looked at the board members one at a time, and none of them looked away first. Renata Solis was not there. She had, as Helen Marsh put it later with deliberate understatement, chosen to take some time away. The chair of the board, a man named Franklin Webb 70s, who had served since Reed's father's era, looked at Reed from the far end of the table with something that might have been relief. We owe you an apology, Franklin Webb said. I want to say that first. You don't owe me anything, Reed said. 400 people work here. That's what matters. The acquisition is dead, Franklin said. We've already notified Harmon Meridian. The board is formally requesting that you take a seat at this table. Reed looked around the room. He thought about the Silverado with the failing brake line. He thought about Gordy and his bicycle. He thought about Hannah's sneakers on the wrong feet and her one-bite cereal negotiation and her chapter books about children who turned out to be more important than anyone had realized. I'm not interested in running Delvance, he said. I want that clear from the start. Several people shifted in their chairs. My interest in the trust doesn't require me to take an operational role, he continued. What I'm interested in is making sure this company doesn't get stripped for parts while 400 people are looking the other way. I'm willing to serve as a trust representative on the board in a non-executive capacity. I'll attend meetings. I'll ask hard questions. I'll vote on matters that affect the long-term health of the company. He paused. That's what I'm willing to do. Franklin Webb looked at him for a long moment. That's more than we had 3 weeks ago, he said. Yes, Reed said. It is. He drove back to Millhaven the next morning. He stopped at the garage before he did anything else. Gordy had the Silverado up on the lift and was finishing the brake line job with the focused seriousness that Reed had always admired. The hydraulic in Bay 2 had stuck at 6 feet again. Gordy had already kicked the panel. How'd it go? Gordy asked without looking up. Fine, Reed said. You fix it? Yeah, cool, Gordy said and went back to work. Reed picked up Hannah from Audra's at noon. She came running out the front door without her jacket, which was typical, and threw herself at him with a force that was slightly dangerous for a 6-year-old. I missed you, she announced, into his shoulder. I missed you too. Audra let me have cocoa for breakfast. Did she? Don't be mad. She's old. He laughed, the kind that came up without warning and felt clean all the way through. He carried her to the truck and buckled her in and drove the 4 blocks to the park, because it was Thursday afternoon, and there was no reason not to. She ran for the swings immediately. He sat on a bench and watched her pump her legs, pushing higher and higher, her face turned up toward the sky with an expression of total concentration and total joy. His phone buzzed. Helen Marsh. Board formally accepted your terms this morning. Trust Council will send paperwork next week. One other thing. Harmon Meridian's principals are under federal investigation now. SEC referral came through this afternoon. Thought you'd want to know. He put the phone back in his pocket. Dad! Hannah yelled from the swings. Watch! She let go at the top of the arc. Just for a second, both hands up, hanging in the air before she grabbed the chains again, and she laughed like it was the simplest thing in the world, to rise that high and not be afraid. He watched. He was watching.